So yeah, let's see what is happening in Lebanon. I have this video from Average Infantryman that somebody suggested. I think we will give it a look. I mean, we all know already what happened. They bombed Israel one day ago with rockets coming from Iran. This is because of the ground invasion from Israel, and yeah, let's see, and then talk about it.
Ground campaign inside southern Lebanon to push Hezbollah fighters back, while Iran has reportedly just fired off a barrage of ballistic missiles back at Israel in retaliation. As war escalates in the Middle East, I'm going to do my best job to give you the information that you need to arm yourself in order to better understand what we might be observing and where we could be headed in the future. It's my goal.
Well, what we are observing is what it was brewing for a very long time. Israel hasn't had any reaction I mean, not any, but not a sizable reaction to the buildup of Hezbollah on the southern Lebanon. The Lebanese army, okay, this time they bombed Beirut multiple times, which is weird. Honestly, I wouldn't have done that. I would have not done that, but I'm not the president of Israel, the prime minister of Israel. So it is clear that the Shia majority in southern Lebanon has become a problem for Israel. This is because Iran is like their sworn enemies. Hezbollah and Hamas work as their proxies to, threaten the existence of the state of Israel. So Israel is basically going to war with them to just reduce, because I don't think it's able to completely kill the Shia population there. And the more bombs they throw, the more terrorists will come. So they will not win this war in that sense, but I would suspect that they are planning on reducing at least the presence of both of Hamas and Hezbollah in Gaza and southern Lebanon, respectively. But of course, the more you bomb, the more problems you're gonna have in the future, right? So it's a self-defeating strategy, in my opinion.
To help clear up some of the fog of war that we're witnessing right now. On September 30th, 2024, Israeli special forces launched targeted raids directly across the border. Their objective is to, I believe, pave the way for a larger ground campaign, most likely, that'll be made up of conventional forces. Behind me is a live conflict map of the border between Israel and Lebanon. Now, this open source intelligence tool helps us connect reports from news agencies and government officials to geolocated specific sites on the map. As you can see, most of the blue markers here are towns that the IDF has advised to evacuate, which gives us some indication as to where the next phase of this war will be fought. The scale of this assault might actually be a lot larger than these reports make it sound, though. According to the IDF themselves, they committed about one whole army division, which in Israel that numbers about 10,000 soldiers. The way the term special forces is used in the IDF and the way that it's reported in the mainstream media is a little differently than how it's used in the US military. Israel's called up 4 reserve brigades, each with 2,000 soldiers and up to 100 tanks. They've also deployed their 36th, 98th, and 91st Division, which suggests to me that they could commit at least 40,000 soldiers to the assault. These are seasoned combat veterans, many of whom spent the last year fighting inside Gaza. The main job of these troops for the IDF will be to find and destroy Hezbollah anti-tank guided missile teams so that a follow-on larger mechanized push can safely move in. This is because there are a handful of roads that connect Israel to Lebanon, through which main battle tanks and troop transports can travel through. There's a very limited amount of places that they can assault.
Well, this tells you that this is a proper ground invasion, right? Kill first the units that can cause trouble to the tanks and then move the tanks in, or the mechanized divisions, just because you're planning on an invasion and probably to stay there. If I remember correctly, southern Lebanon had something called a blue line, and that blue line was occupied by Israel for a very long time, I think deep into the 2000s, and then they retreated from there, and then Hezbollah moved there. And I would suspect that Netanyahu has all the intention of having that place back, let's say.
Assault through with armor. This initial ground assault is designed to clear those limited choke points and gather intelligence on Hezbollah fighting positions to call in airstrikes. The conditions for the regular soldiers on the ground for both sides of this fight is going to be difficult. This is because oftentimes your visibility is going to be limited by forests and buildings in these different towns. That means this battle will be fought at close proximity, oftentimes within 100 meters and below. This isn't going to be necessarily an artillery duel. It's not a tank-on-tank skirmish. These two forces will be up close and see each other with the naked eye. The IDF is pushing in and clearing homes that have been used by Hezbollah as outposts and fire positions. They're also clearing out expansive, sophisticated tunnel networks that the organization has built up over the past 20 years and that they've used to safely transit the region. And if you want to take the IDF at their word, they claim that Hezbollah has been planning to storm 3,000 of their soldiers across the border here in something called Operation Galilee, where it was going to be like an October 7th style attack, except they were going to use these tunnels on the northern border. Hezbollah's retaliation so far, it's been surprising. It's been limited to about 30 rockets on the first day that were fired into Israel, which is...
Well, it's because Israel killed all of their senior members right away. I think that in a chart of the people who were on top of the militia's head, right? I think the main leader has been killed. All the others below him have been killed, and with the pager attack as well, a lot of other corporal have been killed. So it's basically a decapitated organization. So now they're just individually deciding what to do, and it needs time to rebuild. And this is the time where Israel invades, and of course, not probably, but beyond belief, most likely, they build this to be it this way, right? So they kill them before, so then they launch the ground invasion, and they find an enemy that doesn't know how to act really centralized. So most likely it's like this.
Kind of a shock to me. I remember that during the 2006 war with Hezbollah, they managed to fire off on average about 100 rockets per day throughout the conflict. And this is one of the ways that we use to anticipate how Hezbollah is performing. It's been a metric that has been used for the last few decades. This is an early indication to us that some of Israel's actions over the last 2 weeks may have been effective in causing chaos for Hezbollah. I'm looking at you, beepers and walkie-talkies. I don't even know if my frickin' microwave is safe anymore. However, Hezbollah's spokesman, Mohammed Afif, said that this initial rocket fire was quote-unquote only the beginning. While these ground incursions are international news right now at the moment, the truth is that the IDF revealed very recently that they started raids all the way back last year, right after October 7th attack took place. The IDF's elite commandos for the past year have been secretly conducting at least 70 cross-border raids where they stayed inside Lebanon for multiple nights at a time. This phase that already occurred was really the limited small-scale targeted strikes that paved the way for the larger-scale movement that we're currently observing. When I cover difficult topics like this, things are always subject to change, even an hour after I post it. So for more updates as this is happening live, follow me at CappyArmy on Instagram. The link's in the description, and I can show things on there that I'm not able to show here on
nice
YouTube.
Videos lately.
These targeted raids were originally designed to allow Israeli residents to return home, but the IDF claims that they were unable to achieve this objective. By small, I mean that they were on the scale of 2 squads of 20 soldiers and up to a platoon-sized raid of about 40 guys. What we're currently seeing, on the other hand, appears to be a division-sized assault of thousands now. Now, what we're talking about is a military concept known as shaping operations. Shaping operations refer to any actions that you take to establish the preconditions for success in future missions. It's like when you wake up in the morning and you brush your teeth. That's a shaping operation for your day. Shaping operations have been going on here, it appears like, for the past entire year. Israel did not want a repeat of what happened in 2006.
Well, to be honest, in 2006, they were not as angry as they are now and as battle-hardened as they are
October
now.
2nd, geolocated reports were coming in of exactly where these firefights were taking place between Hezbollah and the IDF. Hezbollah reported they were engaged in clashes at the town of Morun al-Ras. The second spot is here near the town of Adesha, where the IDF penetrated 400 meters deep and then they withdrew. So a key military concept that'll make more sense of that is known as operational tempo or op tempo. Op tempo is the speed at which an operation is conducted. Fast op tempo is more risky, but it's designed to overwhelm the enemy's ability to respond effectively and throw them off balance. Keeping a high op tempo would mean that we would see Israel attempt to advance quickly to prevent Hezbollah from regrouping. However, what I think we're seeing is a more slow op tempo, where they're engaging and then disengaging and withdrawing, which is a little bit less risky and slower. So what we're observing right now is that this limited ground invasion or ground assault is already itself a follow-on mission from the raids over the past year that we barely heard about. Over the past year, Hezbollah has fired about 11,000 munitions into northern Israel from inside Lebanon, and Israel has conducted 8,000.
To be honest though, how much effective was that? I don't think I heard too much about it because it was not that effective. Might have killed 10 people in total or anything like this, while airstrikes from the Israel have been very, very much successful. Like there is a disparity of success rate between the two.
1,000 airstrikes in return. There are a lot of headlines that say the region is bracing for wider regional war. And whenever I see that, I always wonder, well, what does that really mean? While it's possible Egypt and Jordan could join in a fight against Israel, it's pretty unlikely, and Syria really has their hands tied with a rebellion. So what I think they're really worried about is what Iran ended up doing next. Yeah. On the morning of October 1st, the Wall Street Journal and other publications were already reporting intelligence that Iran was preparing a ballistic missile strike. This information was coming directly from senior U.S. intelligence officers. The signs that U.S. intelligence look for when determining if Iran is preparing for a strike with ballistic missiles is by looking at changes in satellite images of known launch sites that are near tunnel bases there. They are likely reporting visual signs of mobile launchers being moved into place. Somewhere at the CIA, there is an entire floor dedicated to playing Where's Waldo with Iran's ballistic missile launchers. By Tuesday, October 1st in the afternoon, Israel reported that Iran had in fact launched missiles at them, likely targeting 3 of their bases north of Tel Aviv.
What is crazy is that they fired 200 or something like this missiles and none of them killed anyone. At least this is the reported one. I think they killed 1 Palestinian only, and those were like 200 missiles, so pretty bad rate. If that is the case, as I said, might be underrepresented, so to like make them understand you did nothing to us, maybe, but I mean, from the official numbers, nobody got killed from that. It was just big explosions and maybe like an airfield hit and anything like really important for Israel.
Initial reports indicated Iran had fired off 100 ballistic missiles at Israel, but by early October 2nd, it became more clear what happened. Iran fired off roughly 180 to 200 ballistic missiles. The reason this is significant is because it's a pretty big increase from the 120 that they fired in April. They also used more sophisticated versions. They moved quicker. So Iran said that the reason that they did this was in retaliation for Israel assassinating Hezbollah's leader, Nasrallah, but my personal opinion is that they most likely did it as retaliation for Israel's ground campaign into Lebanon. My personal opinion and analysis is that Iran learned from their first missile attack. Sending drone waves the first time was meant to overwhelm Israel's air defense. But all it really ended up doing, I think, was give them 6 hours of warning to prepare. This time around, by only sending ballistic missiles with this new strike package, Israel had only between 12 and 17 minutes before the missiles got there. Although realistically, we know they had at least 6 hours to prepare because U.S. intelligence spotted signs that the launch was imminent earlier that morning. Most of these missiles from Iran have a circular error probable of between 300 and 500 meters accuracy, so what that pretty much means is that 50% of the missiles will land within 500 meters of where they aim. 3 U.S. destroyers that were stationed off in the Mediterranean fired off interceptor missiles. Iran claimed that 90% of their missiles hit their targets. Am I sure about that? No,
no, that's not the case. I can tell you that.
Definitely not, but I recommend checking out Habitual Line Crosser if you want expert analysis on how air defense works. Video evidence on the ground does show at least a dozen of Iran's ballistic missiles or more impact.
That's a crazy video. I saw that. That was crazy. It looked like raining fire.
acting on the ground. Now, the question is exactly how
Look,
much damage did those impacts cause and what they hit? The air bases that they aimed at were in arid, desert, unpopulated terrain, and there's a huge difference between hitting material assets and hitting dirt. Although even successfully hitting ground does score some kind of like psychological warfare point, so to speak, it's important to note the way Israel's Arrow air defense radar system works is it calculates if the incoming missile will land in a populated area or not, and then it only fires an interceptor missile if it's an actual threat. On the other hand, they also
this is what I thought. A lot of people thought, okay, since it's hitting the ground, it means that they don't have any air defense. But this is not the case. It will just fire because I think they cost $1 million each, these missiles from Arrow 3. So it will only fire if it's necessary, meaning if it's hitting something important or if it's hitting any populated area.
could have been overwhelmed by the speed of the munitions. The Iranian government immediately claimed that they destroyed 20 of Israel's F-35 fighter jets. This story was then carried and circulated by many outlets. Whether or not they really did, there's actually no way Iran could have known that so quickly. There are concrete reinforced hangars that the F-35 are kept in, which can withstand a direct 500-pound bomb. And here's geolocated footage that does show evidence of the strikes hitting the base, but we don't know where. Last time 8 missiles hit the base and they were ineffective. Evidence that the US warned of the attack like 6 hours prior, and the fact that Israeli tanker refueler aircraft were already in the sky tells us that the Israeli F-35s were probably already in the air as well to avoid these hits and to intercept the missiles. My point, though, is that Iran couldn't possibly have done battle damage that quickly to know either way. I was lurking around on Preston Stewart's Twitter page, as one does, and I saw people were still speculating about the battle damage because it was cloudy on October 2nd, so satellite images couldn't confirm or deny it. But there is an information war that's being fought right now all over the internet. And if some people believe those Iranian reports, if even a few thousand do, that's a W for Iran. That's a win. But the battle damage assessments are coming in, and it appears like one missile missed the Israeli Mossad intelligence agency building by about 500 meters. Another missile killed a Palestinian man, which is terrible. Watching that footage, which I saw on X, it was awful what happened to him, and it makes me sick. Another missile hit a school. Israel reported no casualties for the strikes. However, when we look at it from the perspective of Iran and its allies, they also view this as a big win. And this might come down to a difference in mindset, I think, or culture. If I were to put myself in the shoes of Iran and do some red cell thinking, in the West, people like me, we love to quantify everything. We had numbers, how many missiles destroyed how many planes. But if you're in Iran and its allies, the very fact that they retaliated and bombed Israel and that many of their ballistic missiles got through Israel's often highly touted air defense network.
Yeah, like if you think about it, it's a symbolic act, and the symbolic act has worked for them, meaning the Palestinians couldn't wait to see something like this happening. Whether or not it hit, they don't care. They just want somebody like helping them, and this just shows commitment from a side that is bigger than Hamas or Hezbollah, meaning somebody who has your back that is not like a terrorist organization or anything like this. So I can understand them.
This is a victory in and of itself for some people in the Iranian government. But if the missiles didn't cause any casualties, the attack that occurred right before did. 7 people were killed and 16 injured in a shooting in Tel Aviv. We're not sure which group exactly they were linked to yet, but one of the attackers was killed and the other captured, and this just shows the myriad of different threats that Israel faces right now. The prospect of wider war in the Middle East should be horrifying to us all. There's always going to be clickbait, alarmist titles out there designed to get you terrified, and those types, they always have a point. That's the thing. Because World War III could certainly start tomorrow. But I think there's also kind of a limit to how far the escalation can go here, unless the US gets dragged in. I think that's the real thing to keep an eye on. While there is a fear of this escalating to wider war, there are also...
I think that Israel can very well handle this by themselves, and the US is just as a help there, meaning if they fire missiles, US and Israel work together on defending. But if they go into attack, so if Israel goes into attack, the US will provide most likely only intelligence, and all the rest is carried on by the Israeli soldiers, which again are more than capable. They have tens and tens of decades of warfare behind it, more than capable of carrying on this
certain
attacks.
limitations currently for how far this could eventually go.
So no
For
need
example, Iran
for
would
the
not
US
be
to
able
be
to
involved.
launch a ground invasion into Israel and vice
Exactly.
versa. Israel just doesn't have the manpower or the military capability to project power and launch any kind of ground campaign against Iran that's 2 nations away.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean, though, that there still aren't dangers. The United States potentially getting dragged into the conflict would be one terrible situation that we could see happen in the future. Syria is unlikely to attack Israel because many of their forces are already committed against domestic rebellion,
Yeah.
although technically and legally they are still in a state of war with Israel ever since 1948. They never signed a peace treaty in over 75 years. But what about the United States government? What are they doing? Well, for their part, they've signaled that they will do everything within their power to help protect Israel with fighter jets firing anti-air missiles against these Iranian munitions. So over the past 2 weeks, month really, we've seen the US military has moved additional fighter aircraft and Marine infantry units on board landing ships to the region. But the US already has at least a squadron of attack aircraft stationed at an airbase in Jordan. This includes the USS Abraham Lincoln Aircraft Carrier Strike Group is also in the region. Altogether, we're talking about over 100 U.S. fighter, bombers, and interceptors. They're made up of a mix of different F-15s, F-16s, and earlier in August, in fact, the United States even sent 12 of their advanced F-22 Raptors to the Middle East, a likely station inside Jordan. If we do see an Iranian wide-scale attack on Israel, it's likely we would also see a wider-scale retaliation from Israel against targets inside Iran. The first thing that jumps out to me, though, is just how different this ground campaign is compared to the 2006 fight against Hezbollah. Before the ground attack even took place, Israel had effectively wiped out Hezbollah's leadership in targeted assassinations. However, Hezbollah's Deputy Secretary, General Naim Qassam, attempted to wave away any concerns that might happen to be there in their rank-and-file troops by saying in a speech that they were ready to continue combat operations.
To be honest, since they work as a terrorist organization effectively, even though they are like a political wing, but just by the weight that they are a lot of people, and they have like in Lebanon since the civil war, they have to have representative of each sectarian leaders, in the parliament in a way. But it's effectively a terrorist organization, and terrorists don't need really a big centralization of command. They can act alone as lone wolves. So not really they need like a person in command that tells them what to do all the time.
Against the IDF in the face of these losses. Hezbollah will most likely give battlefield promotions to lower ranking members.
Yeah.
Du bist zwischen 2,20 und 2,4
And I mean, even though they don't need it though, they need somebody who tells them how to respond, like a global strategy.
There
they
are
don't have it
4
right
main
now.
crossing points that I was able to find between Israel and Lebanon, and this is where the IDF has concentrated and massed over 100 of their Merkava main battle tanks. The first crossing point is the Rosh Hanikah, which is the main official crossing point, but this one is more of a civilian crossing point monitored by the United Nations, and my understanding is that it's less used for military incursions. Then there's the town of Metula and Kiryat Shimona and the Eliam Valley. Sorry for mispronouncing those words. I can't say them right even when I look them up because of my dyslexia and I just can't say it. Historically speaking, these areas are where cross-border raids first occur. As of October 2024, it appears as though the IDF has withdrawn all but a few thousand soldiers inside Gaza, down from a height of roughly 40,000, and they've since redeployed their resources to the northern border over the past few months.
I think that the blue zone is up to the Litani River.
Main natural geographic boundary to pay close attention to is the Litani River. This river runs parallel to the border, and it's kind of a natural dividing line that the IDF has used in the past to try to advance to.
Yeah.
It's located about 20 miles north of the border, and it's likely where the IDF will attempt to push Hezbollah back to what they call a buffer zone. An IDF spokesperson called for Lebanese people to evacuate all the way to 30 miles north of the Litani River, But Israeli officials told the Wall Street Journal that this incursion's goal right now into Lebanon is to only go 3 miles deep and not all the way 20 miles to the river. Although I'm sure there's some of you out there watching right now who are very skeptical of what the IDF has to say. 20 miles basically puts the Israeli communities and residential centers outside the range of much of their mortar fire and lots of their smaller rockets, and it limits the accuracy and choice of weapons that Hezbollah will have. According to the IDF, their main war goal here is to return the 60,000 Israeli residents who have been displaced by the fighting. They haven't been able to go home for the past year. On the other hand, and Hezbollah has stated that their goal is to prevent Israel from moving deeper into Lebanon, and they say that they're fighting in part on behalf of the Palestinians in Gaza, who over 8 million were displaced there. Another aim of Hezbollah's would be to prevent Israel from occupying and securing southern Lebanon.
Yeah.
It's important to keep in mind, though, that there's also an estimated 200,000 Lebanese citizens in the south who have been displaced for the past year as well. Something on a lot of people's minds is the fact that Israel did invade Lebanon and go all the way to the capital of Beirut back in 1982 when they had a war goal of defeating the PLO in detail. Those people would say, how do we know Israel's not going to do the same thing again? As far as the timeline goes, it took the IDF approximately 1 month to reach this line of advance back in 2006 from the start of major ground operations as a point of reference. But between them and the river are some of Hezbollah's most well-funded and trained units. This is Hezbollah's Redwan unit. It's their special forces, of which there's an estimated 6,000 fighters. Redwan's strategy is to use defense in depth. What that means is they're going to fire rockets, anti-tank guided missiles, machine guns from prepared positions. Then when they start to take too much harassing fire from Israel, they will likely fall back to a series of new defensive lines that they will have prepared over 20-something.
But here's the thing, when you meet a Western force, because Israel is a Western army, which it doesn't matter if you are like, if you are a very specialized unit, it's just bombs. And you have to realize this, also Iraq had good ground forces, good for the standards of the Middle East, of course. But when you're meeting a Western army, you have to be more afraid of the sky than everything else. And the sky, from the sky, you can see everything. From the sky, you can see the movements. If you are inside of a building, Israel can blow it up. If you are in a trench, they can blow it up. It's basically artillery in the sky the whole time. All the time watched, all the time. You cannot move without them noticing. You will suffer a lot of casualties regardless. So a conventional war fought between somebody from the Middle East and a Western army is always a one-sided genocide,
miles back to the river. Their capabilities that this unit often showcases is their hit-and-run tactics, facilitated by dirt bikes and ATVs that allow them to quickly traverse the landscape. They're armed with high-cut military helmets, ballistic body armor, and they're now kitted out with sniper rifles with suppressors. The unit has received hundreds of millions of dollars annually from Iran. They're better funded and equipped than Lebanon's actual army that their government has. They have enough cool guy gear to make Boogaloo boys blush. All this is to say, although the IDF has indeed scored a series of stunning successes over the past few weeks, Hezbollah should not be underestimated. The IDF, those troops, are walking into a heavily mined and well-defended region with between 30 and 50,000 Hezbollah fighters, according to open source estimates, with 150,000 rockets, missiles, and small arms. This estimate has recently been lowered, though, from old reports of around 100,000 fighters, so it believed that Hezbollah may have been overestimated in some cases.
But again, imagine Gaza, right? They struck Gaza. Hamas had like 40,000 fighters. Israel lost 188. They lost 40,000, right? Which they are mixed between civilians, mostly kids, mostly hospital people. But you have to understand, at least 5,000 of those were Hamas fighters. And if not, let's say it's just 1,000. It's still a almost 1 to 10 ratio.
To soften the ground assault for the past 2 weeks, the Israeli Air Force conducted more than 1,600 strikes across southern Lebanon. Almost their whole tanker refueler fleet appears to be in the sky right now, possibly helping refuel
that's what I'm
aircraft
saying.
to stay loitering above targets,
So
looking
they are,
for opportunities to strike.
again, this is what I'm saying. So they see something, they strike it, destroy it, next, 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 and it's constant, and you are nowhere safe in that area.
One of the main lessons the IDF said that they learned from the 2006 war with Hezbollah was better coordination and communication between ground forces, infantry, and close air support in the sky. Yeah. This initial phase of the war plays to the IDF's strengths, which is long-range artillery, airstrikes, and targeted raids. However, the second phase, the conventional push with that armor that is needed to dislodge Hezbollah, is going to be more vulnerable to anti-tank munitions, to getting bogged down by ambushes. This is the more complicated phase. The hilly terrain is advantageous to defenders because it provides brush and vegetation to hide in. Many people think the Middle East is just this flat, arid desert, but this region here in southern Lebanon is actually lush with forests. The Lebanon army has reportedly withdrawn from their positions on the southern border to avoid being pulled into the war. That's right, Lebanon's actual army is separate from Hezbollah. The 10,000 United Nations troops from 15 different countries that are also staying here, right in that region, are also staying out of the fight. These UN soldiers, their mandate is basically to report any violations of Hezbollah back to the UN Security Council. Their mission is to essentially observe and report, not necessarily to fight. Israel has conducted a shockingly effective airstrike against Hezbollah's leader, Nasrallah, who has been in charge of the organization since the 1990s. Over the past 20 years, my point here is that Israel's Mossad agency has been focusing all of their resources on Hezbollah. They developed a plan to be able to hit Nasrallah whenever they wanted. So 8 F-15s from Israel.
Yeah, so that tells you that you're not safe anywhere, and the attack was planned. And most likely inside of the Hezbollah organization, there are a lot of Mossad spies. So they will know where they are. They will know their, intelligence, especially in the Mossad, is very effective. So they will know, if they knew where everybody was hiding, including their head, they will know exactly where they are at all
69
times.
Squadron were each loaded with about 6 American-produced 2,000-pound GBU-31 bunker-busting bombs, and they dropped their payload over the city of Beirut. Exact details of the attack vary from source to source. It appears like Israel used about 80 to 85 bunker buster bombs provided by the US on one single location to burrow deeper and deeper into the earth to hit Hezbollah's deeply buried and well-protected underground headquarters. Some of these underground facilities are more than 100 meters deep, which is typically out of range of even the larger 30,000 bunker buster bomb. Interesting ramifications for Iran's underground, deeply buried nuclear facilities, if you ask me. It calls into question whether or not they're really safe. We're going to continue following this.
And I'm telling you, they are not safe, and this is exactly what Israel wants now. They will most likely blow their facilities to shit, and they most likely have ammunition that we haven't seen it yet. Do I believe this is the initial phase of a very large conflict? I don't think so. I think that this is just Hezbollah and Israel will fight it off. Israel most likely will win, but it will also not create stability in the region, which is probably okay for Israel, because the more they fight, the more their government have a political goal, and the less they have to focus on the real problems of the country. And there are, even though Israel is quite effective, right? The economy of Israel is quite effective because it's a war economy, so they export a lot of weapons. But there are problems, and the Israeli know about it. There are economical problems. There are demographic problems. There are the problems that you're never safe in Israel, and you're not living like a peaceful life. And of course, the isolation on the global stage because of this war. Also, that is something to keep in mind. But do I believe this is the beginning of World War III? I don't think so. But it's a beginning of a regional conflict, and it But I think it will be like the Hamas war, very localized. Egypt and Jordan or Saudi are actually silently on the side of Israel. They will never tell, but that's it.